Hi, I'm going to present about Alice Adventures in Wonderland. Woo! Okay, so the author of this book is named Charles Ludwig Dodgson, but he's more famous by his pen name Lewis Carroll. This is him. He was born in 1832 on the 27th of January in Daresbury, Cheshire, England, and he died on the 14th of January in 1898. He worked as a professor in mathematics at the University of Oxford, but he was also a writer and an amateur photographer. He wrote poems and short stories from a young age, and at the age of 33, he wrote his masterpiece, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland was published in 1865, and the sequel, Through the Looking Glass and What Alice Found There, was published 6 years later in 1871. The books were both written in the Oxford area, as this is where he lived. He wrote the books for the real-life Alice, the daughter of his friend, Alice Liddell, and her two sisters, Lorena and Edith. This is them. He considered Alice to be his dearest child friend, and therefore he decided to name the protagonist in his books after her. He gave the original manuscript of his book to her while he was trying to get it published. He also gave the manuscript to one of his colleagues' son, who also enjoyed reading it. At first, his book was not intended to be published, but as the publisher thought that it didn't teach the children anything. When Dodgson, however, told him that it had been read and loved by children already, the publisher changed his mind, and the book was published as a children's book. There are a lot of characters in Alice in Wonderland. They are mostly animals, talking, walking, and singing. However, there are a few important characters who are the most famous ones, and I will describe them now. So, first of all, there's Alice. She is the protagonist of these stories. She's a little girl from a wealthy family in the Victorian era in England. Alice is 7.5 years old, and she very much likes talking to herself. This actually has a reason for it. During the Victorian era in England, a lot of children grew up without a very good connection with their parents. At that time, the parents thought it was more important to work than to spend time with their children, and considered it the nurses' jobs to raise them. Therefore, Alice is very fond of talking to herself. She never even once mentions her parents, and if mentioned, she refers to her family as them or they. However, she frequently talks about her cat, Dina. This is probably because, as her pet, she sees Dina more than her parents, and logically, she's a bigger part of her life than her mother and father. Then, there is the Mad Hatter. The Mad Hatter is also one of the most famous characters in the story. As a reader, you don't get a very detailed image of him as a person. The author doesn't even describe what he looks like. This makes you forced to create your own picture of him in your head, as well as you have to do with all of the other characters in the story. The Mad Hatter is obviously called the Mad Hatter because he just makes hats, and he's barking mad. From the way he talks, we get to know that he's fond of riddles and puns. He likes playing with words and twisting sentences. His famous riddle, "Why is a raven like a writing desk?" is an example of that. Then there's a summary of the story. We all know the basic plot to it. Alice sits by her sister on the river bank, and she's incredibly bored, so she starts to daydream. She sees the white rabbit and decides to get up and follow it. She tumbles down the rabbit's hole and finds herself in a long corridor with doors and doors in a long row. She finds a door that leads her into Wonderland, and while in there, she is forced to meet all the strange creatures of the world she has stumbled across. We read about her crazy encounters with all these characters and get to attend to the Mad Tea Party, a game of croquet with the King and Queen of Hearts, and a trial to investigate who stole the Queen's tights. Personally, I very much liked and enjoyed this. I very much like this book. I enjoyed reading it because of the downright silliness in it, and because it is entertaining to once again experience childhood, even if it's through someone else's eyes. It's fun to read something and having to experience it all through the eyes of a child. It is almost like we are given an exclusive look into the mind of a 7 years old. I like that you have to create your own opinion about the characters and the settings, as Alice doesn't express very much of them. Of course, she is meant to be realistic, and therefore her reactions aren't the way I would like them to be, but that also makes the book a little more real. However, I think that I disliked about this book is the sudden twists and turns it takes. One second you're at the tea party, and the next you are thrown out to once again meet another creature. It had too much flow for my taste. I like it when things last a little bit longer, instead of only talking to the characters for about 2 pages. So, why do I think that this is a classic? I think that book is a classic because of the obvious statement that it makes. It applauds the imagination of a child and praises childhood. Also, the timelessness and everlasting message of the book counts towards why I think that this book is a classic. The scientific definition of a classic is that it always finds a new generation of readers due to the quality of the writing and the meaning behind it. The message this book mediates is so beautiful yet simple that it can't be resisted by readers. Also, since it is so beloved by people who grew up with the tales and the story of Alice and her adventures, the generation after them is almost forced to love it as well. That's all, folks. Thanks for listening. Yay!